Hi, Sukaja here. Welcome back to the Bookish Bulletin YouTube channel. Today I have a very special thing planned for you all. I'm going to introduce you to some very special people. I'm kidding. There is nobody else here, it's just me. This is a one-woman army. I'm going to introduce you to some books that you will never ever regret reading, and books that I can vouch for are really worth your time, because I had a fantastic time reading all of these books. So I have spent quite a bit of time looking at my bookshelves and trying to figure out what are the 10 books that qualify as my all-time favorites. These books will be across genres and are written by different authors, but these are the ones I think that have stayed with me the longest in the last 6 or 7 years since I've been reading voraciously. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of tea, and let's get into it. First book that I think has remained an all-time favorite for me is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a book I discovered 4 years ago, and the storyline is just so beautiful. This is set during World War II and it revolves around the lives of two characters, Marie LeBlanc, who is the girl, and Werner Fenning, and he is a German soldier, and Marie LeBlanc is a Parisian blind girl who's been living with her father, and her father and her have a very wonderful bond. One of the reasons why I really enjoyed this book was the characterization, and secondly, I also love the lyrical writing. This book has some really good language, and therefore I'm not surprised this won the Pulitzer Prize in 2015. This has been such a great escape for me. Like, I came to this book with the mindset of wanting to escape and go to a different time and place. This book manages to give you that. But also the Netflix series recently came out, so I'm sure several of you who are watching are already familiar with the title, All the Light We Cannot See. But this book essentially deals with radio communication, and Anthony Doerr spent 10 years of his life writing this book. Radio transmission and communication, which we take for granted today, is something that really is the framework of the narrative here. And it's about how Marie LeBlanc makes contact with the German soldier, and he comes to know her in person after the radio transmissions that Marie has shared. Also about her relationship with Uncle Etienne, who is another really lovable character. He's somebody who suffered through trauma of the First World War. He is taking Marie and her father under his care because they've had to leave their place and come to Saint Malo, which is the setting of this novel. It's really, really well written, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, I came to this book at a time when I was really impressionable. I had just returned from a year abroad in the United Kingdom, having studied English literature. And that's when I reached out and found this book, which is about an academic who is living in Nigeria and her experiences of immigrating to the United States. And I think this is captured so well, the experience of alienation, the experience of feeling othered. Now, the character I'm talking about, her name is Ifemelu, and Ifemelu has this experience of understanding that she's actually a colored person, that she's a black person when she goes to the United States for the very first time. Having lived in Nigeria all her life, there has never been a need for her to acknowledge her color as being other or different. But when she goes to the United States, she suddenly becomes very self-conscious of her status as a second-class citizen, or rather somebody who can never be what is considered the norm there. Her Chimamanda, focuses on the details in this book. There are little anecdotes that really remain with you as memories of the book, visualizations as you read the chapters. They start to merge with your own memories as you live your life, and that is something this book did. It's about Obins as well, who is another character. He's the main character's childhood sweetheart, and he is in the UK while she's in the US, and they reunite towards the end of this narrative in Nigeria. And it's also interesting because people who return from the United States to Nigeria, they are considered Americana, right? So that's the name of the novel here. So when she goes back to her country, people brand her as this, returnee American. So this had a lot of relatable aspects for me, which is why I really, really enjoyed this novel at the time that I read it. And this is Chimamanda's third novel, and it has won the National Book Critics Award. And I'm not surprised. I think it's beautifully knitted together, especially the story. I love how it comes together in the end and it's like full circle. When an author manages to pull that kind of thing off, I think This book definitely gets elevated in its status. Next book is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This book can be described as a wild ride in some senses. It is a brilliant characterization and also fantastic piece of historical fiction that is written and set in Victorian England. This reminded me a bit of Oliver Twist. Even in this, there is a den of thieves, and one of the main characters, whose name is Sue Trinder, was raised in a den of thieves. She was raised by a woman who was pretty motherly to her, but Sue never really knew the love of a real mother because she's an orphan. And she's obviously grown and raised in a very rough household, so she is somebody quite comfortable doing immoral things when requested. So a person comes to her one day and asks to be aided in a quest. His name is Gentleman, and Gentleman asks Sue to help him out with this mission where he wants to seduce this heiress to a huge fortune. Heiress is named Maud Lily. Sue agrees to help Gentleman out with this because the plan is to kind of get close to Maud Lily, win her over, and then finally Sue will be able to obtain her fortune and take a share of it, and Maud Lily will be put in a psychiatric ward and siphoned away. So that is the plan. However, things take a turn, multiple turns, multiple plot twists. I think this book can be described in one word as being ingenious. It's just a work of art. Like, the level of detail, the lengths to which the writer has gone to kind of make this such a gripping novel that it will have you sitting at the edge of your seat, reading it with bated breath, wanting to know what happens next, because there are so many unexpected plot twists and turns, and it's a thriller through and through. And the level of suspense is something that she maintains such a steady level that I think it's somebody with a lot of experience in the writing domain who can pull something like this off. And for me, this has just been such a fun, wild ride that I would highly recommend anyone who wants to read a crime thriller set in Victorian England to please pick this book up. Secret History by Donna Tartt. And for those of you who know me, I think I would have mentioned this book to you at one point or the other. This is about a group of 6 students who are studying the classics. They're all literature students and they are going to a college called Hampton College, and this is set in Vermont in the US of A. The 6 group of friends are very tight-knit. It's really difficult to get into this elite classics course, and these students are very impressionable. They absorb everything that they study, and they have a teacher that they are absolutely in awe of. And this teacher, it's hard to get into his classes, but all of them, they do get in. Everything that they learn, they try to recreate in their real lives because they want to have lives that are very different from what is considered the norm. And it's very interesting to observe the group dynamics, the shift in power. There are interesting characters within that group, all of them with different ideas, opposing personalities. They keep having a lot of banter. There's one book that I would want to have as the first book club pick. If I do begin a hypothetical future book club on this YouTube channel, it would be The Secret History by Donna Tartt, because it is a book that has to be unpacked, and it is definitely that is meant to be reread, and I do want to reread this at some point. It is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm going to recommend this to all of you who love Devil Wears Prada. Please go read this book. And I'm also currently watching this series called Hacks on Netflix, which again reminds me of this book in a lot of ways. So definitely check these out and definitely give this a shot. This is the shortest book on my list of 10 all-time favorites, surprisingly. But this is definitely the kind of book you can devour in a single sitting, because this is about a relationship between a reporter who is a article writer and somebody who has been enlisted to interview the main character, who is Evelyn Hugo, and she is a fictional Hollywood starlet. She's had a very exciting career, really long life, and she's at the age of I think 97, and she is having this interview. Once she enlists Monique to write this interview, Evelyn Hugo informs Monique that she wants a biography to be written instead. Now this is written in 7 chapters. Each chapter is named after one of the husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and there's also an adjective affixed just before the husband's name, like Crazy Max or Charismatic Charles, something like that. So each chapter is about the husband and his role in her life and things like that, and also her own journey. We also get very curious as to which of these 7 husbands Evelyn actually considered her true love. And towards the end, there is a big reveal, and I'm sure a lot of readers will be very satisfied with that reveal. It's about the struggle of being a female celebrity in a world that's largely male dominated. So I think this book was just chef's kiss in its execution, and the story was also memorable and something that will really make you feel good as you read it because it's really entertaining as well. So that's why this is one of my favorite books of all time. It's A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Tolls. Now this book again turned out to be one of my all-time favorites, probably because of the time in which I read it. I read it during the lockdown when we were all sequestered inside our homes and without much entertainment and things to do, and this book honestly felt like a warm hug. And I've also made a separate video about that, which I link up here in case you'd like to go check that out. This is about Alexander Rostov, and he is a Russian count living in 1920s or so. So this is set in St. Petersburg. It's in this luxurious hotel called the Metropole, and the count is actually considered a social outcast, and he has been exiled to have this house arrest, which is something that the Russians have been known for doing for the longest time as a part of their punishment regime. And he is expected to live in the metropole for a really long time. But he has really good mental fortitude, which is what is displayed in this novel. And he's able to kind of introspect and use the time, think about important things, talk to people. The book also makes lovely references to cuisines around the world because Metropole is a very fancy hotel, and all the conversations that the Count has with this set of people that he meets over there are done around food and beverage. And he meets some really lovely people, and in a sense it's also a story of found family because while he has no one and he's living in very cramped quarters, he's able to kind of find people who really care about him, and he meets this little girl as well who's really invested in. It's just a heartwarming story because he makes some wonderful connections and learns a lot about what is the true purpose of being a human being and being a count. What are the things he can do in life in his given situation, and he makes peace with the situation, and he finds the sunshine where there is none. So that is A Gentleman in Moscow. Washington Black by S.E. Edukian. S.E. Edukian is a Canadian writer, and this is about a character who is actually a slave. He's born a slave. This is a novel that begins in Barbados, and this slave has a very cruel master. The master has a brother who is of a scientific bent of mind, and the brother is into experiments, and he has built a hot air balloon. So this book involves voyages, it involves a lot of travel, and it involves escape and freedom ultimately. The slave's name is Washington Black, and the person who helps him, the master's brother, is named Christopher Twitch. So Twitch and Washington go on adventures. They escape from the farm, escape from the plantation where Washington is kept in Barbados, and eventually Washington is able to find his own freedom. The relationship that they have is also something really, really nice, and there are things that happen in the background, like the brothers have a fight, the brothers lose their father, and there are some plot twists and turns as well along the way. So we come to know that people who have died have not actually died, and this book sees you going to Marrakesh, it sees you going to Arctic Circle, all of that, and ultimately it is a story about freedom, but it's written really, really well, and I highly recommend it. Next book, my friends, is perhaps my most favorite book of all the books I mentioned in this list, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is a modern classic. So this is a book that inspired me to start a book club where we went and read all of Daphne du Maurier's books, and this is about a narrator who is very naive, and she's in her 20s, and she is serving as a companion to an older woman when all of a sudden she is given this prospect of marrying a young man who's 42 years old and going off to live with him. So after a fortnight of courtship, the narrator agrees to go and live with him in his house, which is called Mandalay, which is a beautiful house. It's in a beautiful estate, and there's rhododendrons all around the house. It's absolutely pristine, and she gets to be the mistress of the house, and she's quite excited. But then there are servants in that house, and one particular servant, Mrs. Danvers, is extremely protective of the person who is our narrator's predecessor, who is Rebecca herself. So she used to be the mistress of the house, and she did a fantastic job as a mistress according to Mrs. Danvers. So Danvers has this annoying habit of comparing everything Rebecca did with what the current narrator is doing, and pointing to the narrator that she is not ever going to match up to Rebecca and her legacy and all of that, because Mrs. Danvers is simply very fond of Rebecca. So the narrator feels like an imposter and has imposter syndrome in this new role of hers, and she feels that no matter what she does, she cannot match up to Rebecca's perfection. She comes to a point where she also starts believing and telling herself that her husband doesn't love her, her new husband, and is still obsessed with Rebecca. But then a lot of dark things, twists and turns happen, and we come to know that what really happened, how Rebecca actually was, and all of that. So there's a lot of psychological aspects involved as well, wherein the narrator feels like the double. If there is one book that you decide to read from my list, I hope it will be this one, because this is the kind of book that would make for a great book club pick, and there are so many different angles, so many different details that people might have missed in the first reading, that it's fun to bring up in a book club setting and actually dissect what could have happened and what might have led this person's motivations. I also recommend reading the book before you actually go and watch any of the television adaptations. You will not be disappointed. And also read the other books by Daphne du Maurier as well, because they're all brilliant. A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. So this book is actually metafiction, which means it's a story within a story, and this is about two people, but mainly our narrator, who is a little girl, and her name is Nao. This is about Nao's experiences, having had no choice and no say in the matter, having to uproot her life in California, where she was very happy living in Sunnyvale, California, and she had to move from there to Japan, Tokyo, because her father had to find a new job in Japan. But then her father is very depressed when he's in Japan because he's unable to find employment, and her mom gets a job in a publishing house, so her parents are really busy all the time and don't have time for Nao. And Nao is trying to combat all the bullying she's receiving in Tokyo for being an outsider, for being an American. So Nao is lonely and spends a lot of her time in this French maid cafe, which is in Akihabara, where she goes to write in her diary, and this diary becomes then our way into the novel, because the diary is found by another American woman. It's washed up on the shore, and it is a remnant of the tsunami that took place, I think, in 2011, and it's found in a Hello Kitty lunchbox. And the woman who finds this immediately feels very drawn to Nao's tale. Nao is determined to learn more about her own Japanese heritage and culture, so she goes to meet her grandmother, where she lives with her for some time in Sendai, and she learns about her own ancestral history, like how her great uncle was somebody who worked in the World War II as a fighter pilot, so things like that. So it's really interesting to know how what happens in the end. I'm going to go on talking about this book. It's just so interesting, and the whole concept of writing the storyline is just brilliant. So I'm going to end this here and be like, anything, this is just, I enjoyed the reading experience of reading this and would highly recommend it. Some of you may be surprised by my last pick, and that is Salem's Lot by Stephen King. This is a book I read just this year, but I definitely think it's going to be on my list of top big books I've ever read in my life. And that is because I was introduced to Stephen King's genius in this, and this is still to this day considered one of his favorite books, and I can see why. This is a vampire story, and it is a ghost story in some senses, and it is done so well. I can remember having the creeps for 3 nights in a row as I just finished reading this novel. Things like, it makes you want to see whether somebody's at your window, it makes you want to check whether the doors are locked in your house, things like that. And it actually made me believe in vampires. That's the craziest thing, right? Like, if a book manages to make you believe in something that you did not for a second in your life expect to believe, and you did, then I think it's really successful, because this really takes the vampire trope to the next level for me. And it's about this guy called Ben Myers, who goes back to his childhood hometown, and he visits this place called the Marston House, which has been occupied by a couple of antique dealers supposedly, but they are actually vampires. So I don't want to give away much, but basically Ben is the writer, and there's also some references to Van Helsing and other famous people in vampire literature in this book, which I thought made it really exciting. It was an absolute page turner. It was something that had the hairs on my skin rise while I was reading it, and it was just such a fun ride through and through. If there's ever going to be one vampire story that I remember till death, I think it would be this one. Would I read something like this again? Yes, absolutely. So for all of you out there who love horror and a good vampire story, I would highly recommend you read Salem's Lot. 10 books, my all-time favorite reads of so far in life. I hope you really like this video. Let me know if any of these books also happen to be your absolute favorites. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. This is your call to action. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and yes, subscribe to my channel, because I worked really hard putting together this video, and I would really appreciate your support by hitting the subscribe button. I'll be back with more bookish content very soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane. Bye.